There's a building that once stood on the corner of a street whose name has been deliberately scrubbed from public records. If you walked past it in 1983, you would have seen bright colors, heard children laughing, smelled pizza baking in industrial ovens that ran 12 hours a day. You would have seen families celebrating birthdays, kids hugging oversized animatronic bears, parents relaxing for the first time in weeks, grateful for 2 hours of entertainment they didn't have to provide themselves. You would have seen the American dream packaged into a family restaurant. But if you looked closer, if you stayed after the families left, if you walked through those party rooms when the lights dimmed and the music stopped, you would have seen something else entirely. Bloodstains hidden beneath fresh paint, animatronics that moved when no one was controlling them. Missing children whose faces still hung on posters by the entrance, faded by sun and time. And if you listened carefully, in those quiet moments between the kitchen's industrial hum and the distant sound of traffic outside, you might have heard something that didn't belong. The sound of a child crying, from somewhere deep inside the machinery. This is not the story of a video game franchise. This is the complete history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, of Fazbear Entertainment, of the men who built an empire on family entertainment and left behind a legacy soaked in tragedy, death, and something far worse than either. This is the story of how a simple restaurant became a tomb, how cutting-edge animatronic technology became a prison for the dead, how two brilliant men, partners, friends, creators, built something beautiful and watched it rot from the inside out, and how, decades later, that rot is still spreading. What you're about to hear is the most complete timeline ever assembled. Not just the events you know from the games, but the entire hidden history of Fazbear Entertainment, the technical evolution, the corporate cover-ups, the personal tragedies that drove every decision, every murder, every desperate attempt to undo what had already been done. This documentary synthesizes evidence from every game, every book, every hidden detail Scott Cawthon embedded in this world over nearly a decade of storytelling. Some of what you'll hear is confirmed fact. Some is built on overwhelming evidence. Some remain speculation, carefully marked as such. But all of it connects. And if you're the kind of person who wants to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, and how every piece fits together into one coherent history, then you're in the right place. Because there are more documentaries like this coming. Deep investigations into every corner of this universe. And if that sounds like something you genuinely want to see, then subscribe because we're only getting started. Now let's go back before the murders, before the haunted animatronics, before Freddy Fazbear's Pizza ever opened its doors. Back to the very beginning, to two men with a dream. The story begins in the late 1970s, in a time when America was falling in love with animatronics. Disney had proven the technology could create magic. Showbiz Pizza and Chuck E. Cheese were turning it into profit. Restaurants across the country were discovering that parents would pay premium prices for pizza if it meant their children were entertained by singing robots. It was a gold rush, and two men saw an opportunity, Henry Emily and William Afton. On the surface, they were an unlikely partnership. Henry was the engineer, the idealist, the kind of man who saw animatronics not as a gimmick but as an art form. He believed in creating something that would bring genuine joy to children, something that would make them believe, even if just for an afternoon, that these characters were real. William Afton was different. He was brilliant, charismatic, a businessman who understood not just how to build animatronics but how to sell them, how to turn a technical achievement into a profitable empire. But there was something else about William. Something that even Henry, his closest partner, didn't fully understand at the time. William saw potential in the technology that had nothing to do with entertainment. He saw control. He saw permanence. He saw a way to cheat death itself. but that comes later. In the beginning, they were just two men with a shared vision, and together they opened Fredbear's Family Diner. Fredbear's Family Diner was small, modest, nothing like the sprawling pizza empires that would come later. It was a single location, a handful of tables, a small stage, and two animatronic characters that Henry had poured countless hours into perfecting. Fredbear, a golden bear with a purple hat and bow tie, friendly and bright, and Spring Bonnie, a golden rabbit with a permanent smile. These weren't like the animatronics you'd see at other restaurants. Henry had built them with a level of care and craftsmanship that bordered on obsessive. Their movements were smoother, their expressions more lifelike. They weren't just robots performing pre-programmed routines. They felt alive, and the children loved them. But Henry and William had innovated something else, something that would become central to the entire history of Fazbear Entertainment, something that would eventually destroy everything they built: springlock suits. The concept was ingenious. Most animatronics were purely mechanical. They stood on stage, performed their routines, and that was it. If you wanted a human to wear a costume and interact with kids up close, you needed a separate suit. But Henry had designed something revolutionary, a hybrid. The springlock suits could function as both animatronics and wearable costumes. When the springlocks were wound tight, they compressed the animatronic endoskeleton components against the inside walls of the suit, creating enough space for a human to climb inside and wear it like a costume. It was cost-effective, versatile, brilliant, and catastrophically dangerous. The springlocks were under constant tension. They required careful maintenance, precise handling, and they were extremely sensitive to moisture, sudden movements, or even humid air. If the springlocks failed while someone was inside the suit, the animatronic components would snap back into place, instantly, violently. Metal rods, gears, and crossbeams would crush inward, impaling the person inside from dozens of angles simultaneously. Henry knew the risks. He created extensive safety protocols, training procedures, warning systems, but William didn't seem afraid. In fact, he volunteered to wear the Spring Bonnie suit regularly, performing as the character during birthday parties and special events. He was good at it. The kids loved him. And William loved the attention. Fredbear's Family Diner became a local success. Not a massive chain, but profitable enough to prove the concept worked. Families came back week after week. The animatronics became beloved characters in the community. Henry was proud of what they'd built. He had a daughter now, Charlie. She was young, bright-eyed, full of the same creative energy that drove Henry's work. He would bring her to the diner sometimes, let her watch the animatronics perform. She loved Fredbear and Spring Bonnie almost as much as the other children did. For Henry, Fredbear's Family Diner wasn't just a business. It was a legacy he was building for her. But William was already thinking bigger. He saw the profits. He saw the potential for expansion, and he began planning something far more ambitious: a new company, a new brand. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The transition from Fredbear's Family Diner to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza marked a fundamental shift in the scope and scale of what Henry and William were building. Fredbear's had been a proof of concept. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would be an empire. The exact timeline is murky, obscured by decades of corporate restructuring and deliberate obfuscation, but the evidence suggests that by the early 1980s, a new location was already in development. This wasn't just an expansion. It was a reinvention. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza would be larger, brighter, more ambitious in every way, and it would introduce a new cast of characters. Freddy Fazbear, the face of the brand. A brown bear with a top hat and microphone, designed to be friendly, iconic, marketable. Bonnie, a blue rabbit with a guitar. Chica, a yellow chicken with a bib that read "Let's eat." And Foxy, a red pirate fox with an eye patch and a hook. These weren't springlock suits. They were purely animatronic, larger, more complex, more expensive to build. Henry had outdone himself. The engineering behind these characters was extraordinary. They could walk, turn their heads, interact with each other during performances. Their facial expressions were controlled by sophisticated servo systems that gave them an almost eerie sense of personality. From a technical standpoint, they were masterpieces. But Henry had also built something else into these animatronics, something he thought would protect children, a security feature. The animatronics were programmed to recognize faces, to detect movement, to identify adults versus children. And if someone was in the building after hours, somewhere they shouldn't be, the animatronics would respond. Henry designed this feature with good intentions. He wanted to make sure children were safe. He wanted the animatronics to be able to find a lost child wandering the building after closing. He never imagined how that feature would be exploited, how it would turn his creations into something monstrous. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened to massive success. The location was packed from day one. The animatronics were a hit. The pizza was cheap and decent enough that parents didn't complain. The entertainment was engaging enough that kids begged to come back. Fazbear Entertainment, the parent company Henry and William had officially formed, was on track to become a major player in the family entertainment industry. Everything was working. Everything was perfect. And then William Afton murdered Henry's daughter. We don't know exactly when it happened. We don't know what drove William to do it. But we know it happened outside Fredbear's family diner, which was still operating alongside the new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. Charlotte Emily was locked outside. The details are fragmentary, pulled together from environmental storytelling in the games, from the novels, from hidden minigames that reveal the truth in abstract, heartbreaking imagery. There was a party inside. Charlie was outside, alone, crying. And William Afton was there. Perhaps he saw an opportunity. Perhaps this was premeditated. Perhaps something inside him had finally snapped. We know he was wearing something. Perhaps a costume. Perhaps nothing at all. We know he killed her, quickly, quietly. And when it was done, her body was left in the alley behind the diner. But something else happened. Something that would define the rest of this story. One of Henry's creations found her. The puppet. The security puppet, to be precise. Henry had built it as a gift for Charlie. An animatronic designed to watch over her, to keep her safe when he was busy managing the diner. It was inside when she died, locked in a box, bound by a mechanism it couldn't override. By the time it freed itself and found her, it was raining. Charlie was already gone. But the puppet stayed with her, and something happened. Something that shouldn't have been possible. Charlotte Emily's soul fused with the puppet, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Her consciousness, her essence, her anger and grief and confusion bound itself to the animatronic that was supposed to protect her. This was the first time a human soul became trapped inside a machine, and it wouldn't be the last. In fact, this may have been the moment William Afton realized something extraordinary, that the animatronics Henry had built weren't just machines. They were containers, and human souls could be bound to them. Whether William witnessed what happened to Charlie directly or discovered it later, we can't be sure. But what's certain is that this event changed him. He became obsessed with life and death, obsessed with the animatronics. Obsessed with the idea that consciousness could persist beyond the body, that he could make it persist. Henry, meanwhile, was destroyed. His daughter was gone, murdered by someone who was never caught. He threw himself into his work, perhaps as a way to cope, perhaps because he didn't know what else to do. He never suspected his partner, his friend, the man who had helped him build everything, and William was careful. He consoled Henry, attended the funeral, continued working as if nothing had changed. But inside, something had shifted. William Afton had discovered something he believed was the key to immortality, and he was going to test it. The exact sequence of events in the early 1980s is difficult to pin down with absolute certainty. What we know is that multiple tragedies occurred in rapid succession, each one building on the last, each one dragging Fazbear Entertainment deeper into horror. One of those tragedies involved William Afton's own family. William had a wife, though she's barely mentioned in the canon and her fate remains unknown. But he had 3 children, Michael, the oldest, Elizabeth, his daughter, and a younger son whose name we never learn, referred to by the community as the Crying Child. The Crying Child was terrified of the animatronics. Specifically, he was terrified of Fredbear. Why, we don't know for certain, but there are hints. He had nightmares. Constant, recurring nightmares filled with twisted versions of the animatronics. Versions with razor-sharp teeth and claws. Versions that chased him through endless hallways. These nightmares were so vivid, so specific, that they suggest something deeper than a normal childhood fear. Some believe he witnessed something. Perhaps he saw William wearing the spring Bonnie suit in a context that terrified him. Perhaps he saw something happen to another child. Perhaps William, in his obsession, exposed his youngest son to things no child should ever see. Whatever the cause, the Crying Child was traumatized, and his older brother, Michael, made it worse. Michael was a teenager, reckless, cruel in the way teenagers can be when they don't yet understand consequences. He and his friends wore masks, Foxy, Bonnie, Chica. They tormented the Crying Child relentlessly, locked him in rooms with the animatronics, jumped out at him wearing the masks, laughed when he screamed and cried. It was bullying, stupid, thoughtless, teenage bullying, but it was building towards something. The Crying Child's birthday was coming, and the party was going to be at Fredbear's family diner, the place he feared most. The day of the party, the Crying Child was already sobbing. He didn't want to be there. He begged not to go near Fredbear, but Michael saw an opportunity. One final prank. He and his friends grabbed the Crying Child, carried him toward the stage, kicking and screaming, and they shoved his head directly into Fredbear's mouth. Maybe they thought it would just scare him, maybe they thought it would be funny, but Fredbear was a Springlock animatronic, and the Crying Child's tears, his saliva, the moisture from his terrified breath, the Springlocks failed. Fredbear's jaw snapped shut. There was a sound, a crunch, screaming. Panic, blood. The Crying Child's skull was crushed. He didn't die immediately. He was rushed to a hospital. For days he lingered, comatose, dying, and William Afton sat by his bedside. We know this from the fragmented dialogue in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. A distorted voice speaking to the Crying Child in his final moments, promising something. "I will put you back together." The Crying Child died, and William made good on his promise, not by saving him, but by trapping him, binding his soul to something. Whether it was Fredbear or Golden Freddy or something else entirely, the evidence is conflicting. But the Crying Child's soul didn't move on. It stayed, just like Charlie's. This event became known as the Bite of '83. The year is confirmed through Easter eggs and environmental details scattered across the games. It was a tragedy, an accident, but it changed everything. Fredbear's family diner closed shortly afterward. The public backlash was immediate and devastating. Parents didn't want their children anywhere near animatronics that could kill. Fazbear Entertainment tried to contain the damage. They shifted focus entirely to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. They retired the Springlock suits from public use. They buried the incident as deeply as they could. But for William, the Bite of '83 wasn't a tragedy. It was confirmation. He had lost his son. But his son's soul was still there, still aware, still trapped inside the machine. William Afton now knew beyond any doubt that human consciousness could survive death if bound to the right vessel. And he was going to use that knowledge, not to bring anyone back, but to achieve immortality for himself. William's obsession deepened, but he needed to experiment. He needed to understand the process. How exactly did a soul bind to an animatronic? Was it the trauma of death? The proximity to the machine, something else? He needed more data, more subjects. And so, sometime in the mid-1980s, William Afton committed the act that would define his legacy. The missing children's incident. One day, 5 children vanished from Freddy Fazbear's pizza. Their names are lost to time, though the community has given them identities based on context clues: Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, Jeremy, Cassidy. They were lured away during the day by someone in a costume, Spring Bonnie. William wore the suit he'd performed in so many times before. The children trusted him, they followed him, and he led them to a back room, a place the cameras didn't reach. What happened next was methodical, calculated. He killed them, one by one. And then he did something that should have been impossible. He stuffed their bodies inside the animatronics. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and a 5th, Golden Freddy. We don't know how he managed it. The animatronics were complex, tightly packed with machinery. There shouldn't have been room, but William found a way. He hid the bodies inside the suits, and then he waited. The restaurant was thrown into chaos. Parents reported their children missing. Police searched the building, but they found nothing. The bodies were hidden too well, and within days something began to happen. The animatronics started to smell. A foul, rotting odor that permeated the entire building. Blood and mucus began to leak from their eyes and mouths. The staff noticed, parents complained. But Fazbear Entertainment didn't shut down. They didn't call the police. They didn't investigate. They cleaned the animatronics, tried to mask the smell, and kept the restaurant open. This is confirmed, not speculation. In-game newspapers from the original 5 Nights at Freddy's directly reference the incident. 5 children now reported missing. Suspect convicted. A man was arrested, but he wasn't William Afton. Someone else took the fall. Perhaps an employee, perhaps a scapegoat, perhaps someone William deliberately framed, we don't know. But the newspapers confirmed the suspect was later released due to lack of evidence. The real killer was never caught, and the children, their bodies were never found. But their souls were trapped, bound to the animatronics, confused, angry, vengeful. They didn't understand what had happened to them. They only knew they'd been killed, and they knew the animatronics had something to do with it. Over time, they began to move. To take control of the machines they were trapped inside. They would wander the pizzeria at night, searching, looking for the man who killed them, but they couldn't recognize him. All they saw were adults, people in security uniforms, people who didn't belong in the pizzeria after hours. People who looked like the man in the Spring Bonnie suit, and so they attacked, dragging anyone they found into the back rooms, trying to stuff them into spare animatronic suits, trying to make them the same as they were, dead, trapped, forever. This was the birth of the haunting. The reason the animatronics in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza roam at night, the reason they're hostile, the reason they've killed so many night guards over the years. They're not malfunctioning. They're not following some glitched programming. They're children, dead children, seeking revenge against a man they can no longer recognize. And William Afton, he got away with it for years. He continued working at Fazbear Entertainment, continued building animatronics, continued experimenting, because the missing children's incident had proven his theory. Human souls could be trapped, bound to machines, made to persist indefinitely, and if it worked for children, it would work for him. All he needed was the right vessel, the right moment. But before he could achieve immortality, William had another project, one that was even more ambitious, even more horrifying. He was going to build animatronics specifically designed to kill children, and he was going to use his own daughter to test them. William Afton didn't just work on Fazbear Entertainment's public-facing projects. He had his own company, Afton Robotics. This was his private venture, a place where he could experiment without Henry's oversight, without ethical limitations, without anyone questioning what he was building or why. And what he built was the Funtime animatronics. These weren't entertainment robots. They were designed for a very specific purpose: kidnapping, murder, and experimentation. On the surface, they looked like advanced versions of the Fazbear characters: Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy Ballora, and the centerpiece, Circus Baby. They were beautiful, sleek, high-tech, designed with cutting-edge articulation, voice modulation, and interactive features that far surpassed anything Henry had built. But hidden inside each of them were mechanisms that had nothing to do with entertainment: retractable claws, storage tanks, compartments designed to hold a child's body. William had built these animatronics to lure children, to trap them, to kill them, and to store their bodies until he could extract whatever he needed for his experiments. He planned to open a new location, Circus Baby's Pizza World, a sister location to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, themed around a circus instead of a traditional pizzeria. It was going to be spectacular, state-of-the-art, a showcase of everything Afton Robotics could achieve. But before the grand opening, William brought his daughter to see the animatronics. Elizabeth Afton, she was young, fascinated by the robots her father built, and she loved Circus Baby. Baby was designed to appeal to children: bright colors, a friendly voice, ice cream. She could dispense ice cream from a compartment in her chest. Children would approach her, press a button, and she would give them ice cream, except when she was alone with a child. Then, a different mechanism would activate. A metal claw would extend, grab the child, and pull them inside. William knew this. He'd built the feature himself, and he explicitly told Elizabeth to stay away from Circus Baby. But Elizabeth didn't listen. She wanted to see Baby up close, wanted the ice cream, wanted to interact with the animatronic her father had built. And one day, when no one else was around, she approached. Circus Baby's voice was sweet, encouraging. "She can make ice cream." "But Dad said I couldn't go see her." Elizabeth got too close, and Circus Baby's programming activated. The claw extended, grabbed her, and pulled her inside. There was nothing anyone could do. By the time William found out, Elizabeth was already dead, crushed inside the animatronic he'd built. Trapped inside Circus Baby, just like the other children, just like his own son. William Afton had now lost 2 of his 3 children to the machines he created. Circus Baby's Pizza World never opened to the public. The grand opening was canceled. Afton Robotics was quietly shuttered. The Funtime animatronics were moved to an underground facility beneath one of the Fazbear entertainment properties, a rental service, a storage facility, a place where they could be kept out of sight, out of mind. But Elizabeth's soul remained, trapped inside Circus Baby, aware, confused. And over time, she began to take control, just like the other children. But Elizabeth was different. She was William Afton's daughter, and some part of her still remembered him, still loved him, still wanted to make him proud, even in death. This underground facility would become known as Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, and it would play a critical role in the events to come. But first, Fazbear Entertainment had to survive the fallout from the missing children's incident, and that meant reopening Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. With new animatronics, new technology, and new tragedies waiting to unfold, by 1987, Fazbear Entertainment was desperate. The original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location, the one where the missing children's incident occurred, had been closed. The company's reputation was in tatters. Parents didn't trust the brand. Investors were pulling out. The entire enterprise was on the verge of collapse. But Fazbear Entertainment did what it always did. It rebranded, buried the past, and opened a new location. A grand reopening, bigger, brighter, safer. They retired the old animatronics, the ones that had been tied to the murders and the hauntings. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy were moved to storage, labeled as backup characters. Left to rot in a back room in their place, Fazbear Entertainment introduced new models, toy animatronics. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, and a new character, the puppet, the same puppet that Charlie's soul had fused with. They didn't know it was haunted. They just knew it was effective at keeping children safe. Ironic. These new animatronics were designed with the latest technology. Facial recognition software, criminal databases. They could scan every adult who entered the building and cross-reference them against records of convicted offenders. It was a security feature, a way to reassure parents that their children were safe. But it also meant the animatronics were programmed to be suspicious of adults, especially adults who were alone, at night, in places they shouldn't be. The new Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened in 1987, and for a while it seemed like the company had recovered. Families returned. The new animatronics were a hit. The technology impressed parents. Everything was working. But the old animatronics were still there, still in the building, still haunted. And the spirits of the dead children were still searching, still angry. The puppet, now active in the new location, seemed to watch over the other animatronics, as if it had some awareness of what had happened, some understanding that the children's souls needed to be protected, or perhaps guided toward revenge. But the real disaster came later that year. The bite of '87. We don't know exactly what happened. The details are deliberately vague, but we know that one of the animatronics bit someone, a customer most likely, or possibly an employee. The bite was severe. It destroyed the frontal lobe of the victim's brain. Somehow they survived. But the damage was catastrophic. The incident made national news. Fazbear Entertainment was sued, investigated, torn apart by the media. The new location closed almost immediately. The toy animatronics were scrapped. The old animatronics were supposed to be destroyed as well, but they weren't. They were moved, stored, left in the dark, and the souls inside them continued to wait. The bite of '87 marked the beginning of the end for Fazbear Entertainment's golden age. From this point forward, the company would exist in a state of constant decline. Smaller locations, cheaper animatronics, fewer employees, tighter budgets, but they kept trying, kept reopening, because shutting down permanently would mean admitting what had really happened, and Fazbear Entertainment would never do that. They would rather let the bodies stay hidden, let the animatronics keep walking, let the horror continue, as long as they could keep making money, as long as they could keep the truth buried. And William Afton, he was still out there, still experimenting, still working toward his ultimate goal, immortality. But his time was running out. Because someone was starting to piece together what he'd done, someone who had been part of this story from the very beginning. And that someone was about to make a choice that would change everything. Michael Afton had been living with guilt for years. The memory of his brother's death never left him. The sound of the spring lock snapping shut, the screaming, the blood, it replayed in his mind constantly, a loop he couldn't escape. He'd killed his own brother, not intentionally, not maliciously. But that didn't matter. The crying child was dead because of him, and Michael had to live with that. By the time he reached adulthood, Michael Afton was a broken person, hollow, going through the motions of life without really living. His mother was gone. His sister was dead, though the circumstances of Elizabeth's death were kept hidden from him for years. His younger brother was dead, and his father, William Afton, had become distant, obsessive, consumed by work Michael didn't understand, work that took him away for weeks at a time. Work that involved animatronics and experiments and things William refused to discuss. Michael didn't know what his father was doing, but at some point, William told him something, gave him instructions, sent him on a mission. We don't know exactly what William said. But we know Michael ended up working at Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, the underground facility where the Funtime animatronics were kept. Why? The most widely accepted interpretation, supported by dialogue in sister location, is that William sent Michael to put her back together. To find Elizabeth, to free her, or perhaps to retrieve something from Circus Baby, something William needed for his experiments. Michael took a job as a technician at the facility. He was given instructions each night: maintain the animatronics, run diagnostics, follow the voice on the intercom. That voice claimed to belong to an AI, a helpful guide designed to train him. But the voice was lying. It wasn't an AI. It was Circus Baby, Elizabeth, his sister, and she was leading him into a trap. The underground facility was unlike anything Michael had ever seen. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't a public space. It was a storage and maintenance facility, industrial, cold, dark. The Funtime animatronics were kept in separate rooms. Funtime Freddy, manic and unstable with a hand puppet named Bon Bon. Funtime Foxy, sleek and predatory. Ballora, graceful and unsettling, dancing endlessly in the dark. And Circus Baby, the centerpiece, locked in her own private chamber. Each night Michael was given tasks: repair this, reboot that, crawl through maintenance tunnels, avoid the animatronics when they became aggressive. And they did become aggressive, not randomly, not because of faulty programming, because they knew what they were going to do. They were planning something, and they needed Michael alive just long enough to complete it. By the fifth night, Baby's deception became clear. She gathered the other Funtime animatronics, and together they did something that should have been impossible. They tore themselves apart, ripped out their endoskeletons, combined their parts into a single, amalgamated entity, Ennard. A horrifying tangle of wires, metal and animatronic components, dozens of eyes, multiple voices speaking at once, a fusion of every soul trapped in the Funtime animatronics, Elizabeth and others, children William had used to test his creations. Victims we never see but whose presence is implied in the animatronics' behavior. Ennard needed something, an escape. The facility was underground, sealed. The animatronics couldn't leave, not as they were. But if they had a human body to hide inside, if they could wear someone like a suit, they could walk out, free, and Michael Afton was that person. Baby lured him into the scooping room, a place where animatronics were disassembled, where endoskeletons were removed from their outer shells using a massive mechanical arm, the scooper. Michael realized what was happening too late. Baby's voice dropped the pretense. She admitted the deception, admitted what they were going to do, and then the scooper activated. It tore through Michael's body, ripped out his organs, hollowed him from the inside. He should have died. He wanted to die, but Ennard didn't let him. The tangled mass of animatronic parts crawled inside his body, filled the empty cavity where his organs had been, used his skin like a costume, and walked him out of the facility. Michael Afton was dead, but he was still walking, still moving, because Ennard was controlling him, puppeting his corpse for weeks. Ennard used Michael's body to move through the world undetected, but a corpse decays. Michael's skin began to rot, turn purple, peel away. People started to notice. Ennard couldn't maintain the disguise, and eventually they abandoned him, crawled out of his body through his mouth, left him collapsed in an alley, a rotting, hollowed-out corpse. Michael Afton should have stayed dead, but he didn't. He stood up. Something inside him refused to let go, some spark of life, some remnant of consciousness. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps it was unfinished business. Perhaps it was something William had done to him without his knowledge, some experiment, some injection of the same substance William had been using in his research. Remnant, a material extracted from haunted animatronics, a physical manifestation of the energy that bound souls to metal. William had been experimenting with it for years. injecting it into the funtime animatronics to make them more responsive, more alive. And if Michael had been exposed to it, if William had used his own son as a test subject, it would explain why Michael survived, why his corpse continued to function even after everything had been scooped out. Michael Afton was no longer human. He was something else, something undead, a walking corpse animated by remnant and willpower. And once he recovered, once he understood what had been done to him, he made a decision. He was going to find his father. He was going to find William Afton. And he was going to stop him, no matter what it took. But William Afton was already gone. He'd abandoned Afton Robotics, disappeared from Fazbear Entertainment's records, vanished. For years, there was no sign of him. Fazbear Entertainment continued its decline. They reopened smaller locations, used the old animatronics, tried to squeeze every last dollar out of a dying brand, but the hauntings continued, the murders continued, and the company kept covering it up, kept hiring new night guards, kept burying the truth. Michael began working as a night guard at these locations. Not for the paycheck, but because he was searching for answers, searching for his father, searching for a way to undo the damage that had been done. He worked at the original Freddy Fazbear's pizza location, the one that had been reopened briefly in 1993. The same location where the missing children's incident occurred. The same place where the original animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, still wandered at night, still searching for their killer. Michael survived 5 nights, maybe more. He learned how to avoid the animatronics, how to conserve power, how to survive until 6 a.m. But he didn't find his father. The location closed shortly after, budget cuts, health violations, the same cycle, and Michael moved on. He may have worked at other locations. Other Freddy Fazbear's pizza restaurants that opened and closed in the years following the bite of '87, each one a little cheaper, a little more desperate, each one haunted by the same animatronics, the same souls, the same anger. But Michael kept searching, kept surviving, kept hoping that eventually he'd find William. And then, decades after the missing children's incident, something changed. Someone decided to dig up the past, literally. A horror attraction was opening, Fazbear's Fright. And they'd found something in the ruins of one of the old Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations, something that had been sealed away for 30 years, a spring Bonnie suit, with something still inside it. We need to go back to what happened to William Afton after the missing children's incident. After the murders, after he'd successfully trapped the children's souls inside the animatronics. For years, William got away with it. He continued his experiments, continued his research into remnant and soul possession, continued building toward his ultimate goal, immortality. But the spirits of the children never stopped searching. They were trapped in the animatronics, trapped in the locations, but they were aware and they remembered, not clearly, not completely, but they knew someone had killed them, someone in a yellow rabbit suit. And eventually, William made a mistake. He returned to one of the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations. Why? Perhaps to retrieve something, perhaps to destroy evidence, perhaps to harvest more remnant from the haunted animatronics. We don't know, but he broke into the sealed building. And the spirits were waiting. The animatronics, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, cornered him. They didn't attack, not immediately. They just stared. These empty shells, these machines he'd used to trap them, and William panicked. He destroyed them, tore them apart, ripped the endoskeletons out of the suits, scattered the pieces. Perhaps he thought destroying the animatronics would free the souls, or perhaps he just wanted to eliminate the evidence. But it didn't work. The spirits didn't disappear. Instead, they manifested. Without the animatronics to contain them, they appeared as ghostly apparitions, the shapes of children, translucent flickering surrounding him, advancing. William ran, fled to the back room, the safe room, the same place where he'd killed them. The same place where the spring Bonnie suit was stored, and in his desperation, he made a choice. He climbed inside the spring Bonnie suit. Perhaps he thought it would hide him. Perhaps he thought the suit that had allowed him to lure the children would protect him from their spirits. Perhaps he thought he could use it to scare them away. He put it on, and the spirits stopped, watched, waited. William laughed. He'd done it. He'd escaped. The suit had saved him. But the room was old, abandoned. The roof was leaking. Water dripped from the ceiling onto the suit, onto the spring locks, and William Afton realized his mistake. The spring locks failed, all of them, simultaneously. Metal rods drove through his chest, his arms, his legs. Gears crushed his ribcage. Crossbeams impaled him from a dozen directions. He screamed, tried to move. But every movement caused more spring locks to fail, more metal to pierce his body. He collapsed. Blood pooled inside the suit. He was dying, slowly, agonizingly. But he didn't die, not completely. Because William Afton had spent years researching Remnant, studying how souls could bind to metal. And now, in his final moments, that research saved him, or damned him. His soul fused with the spring Bonnie suit, just like the children, just like his own daughter, just like everyone he'd trapped. William Afton became Springtrap, a rotting corpse trapped inside a decayed animatronic. Unable to die, unable to escape, forever bound to the suit that had killed him. The safe room was sealed, boarded up, left to rot, and Springtrap remained inside for 30 years, alone in the dark, still aware, still conscious, still William Afton, but no longer human. Fazbear's Fright. The horror attraction opened in 2023, decades after the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations had closed, decades after the murders. The missing children's incident had become urban legend, the kind of story people told to scare each other, a creepypasta, a myth. Most people didn't believe it had really happened, but a group of entrepreneurs saw an opportunity. They decided to create a horror attraction based on the legends, a haunted house experience using real props and animatronics from the original locations. They scoured the abandoned buildings, collected relics, old arcade machines, posters, costumes, pieces of animatronics, anything that could add authenticity to the attraction. And then they found something special in a sealed room in one of the old buildings. A room that wasn't supposed to exist. A room that had been hidden behind false walls. They found a spring Bonnie suit, old, decayed, damaged, but intact and still functional. They brought it to Fazbear's Fright, put it on display. The centerpiece of the attraction, a real animatronic from the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. They had no idea what was inside it, no idea that the suit was haunted, no idea that William Afton was still in there, still aware, still waiting. The attraction hired a night guard, someone to watch the building after hours, make sure nothing was stolen, make sure the animatronics didn't get damaged, standard security work. But on the first night, Springtrap moved. He was still functional, still able to walk, still able to hunt. And after 30 years of isolation, William Afton was free. The night guard survived, barely. Each night, Springtrap became more active, more aggressive, hunting through the building, searching. Perhaps he was looking for more victims. Perhaps he was looking for Remnant. Perhaps he was simply trying to escape. The attraction's owners thought it was a malfunction, a quirk of the old animatronic. They didn't realize what they'd unleashed, but someone else knew. Michael Afton had been tracking Fazbear Entertainment's history for years, following every lead, every rumor, every reopening. And when he heard about Fazbear's Fright, he knew. His father was there. Michael may have been the night guard, or he may have arrived later. The timeline is ambiguous, but what's certain is that Michael found his father, saw what William had become. A rotting corpse inside a decayed animatronic, trapped, suffering, but still alive, still aware. And Michael realized something. His father couldn't die, Couldn't be stopped, not like this. As long as Springtrap existed, William Afton would continue experimenting, continue killing, continue spreading his corruption. There was only one option: burn it all. On the sixth night, Fazbear's fright burned to the ground. The fire started in the building's faulty wiring, or at least, that's what the official report said. But it's far more likely the fire was deliberately set by Michael, or by someone else who knew the truth, someone who wanted to end this. The entire attraction was consumed. Everything inside was destroyed: the relics, the decorations, the animatronics, and Springtrap. Fire is one of the few things that can destroy remnant, that can sever the connection between a soul and the metal it's bound to. Michael thought it was over. Thought his father was finally dead, thought the cycle had ended. But he was wrong, because Springtrap survived, damaged, burned, barely functional, but still intact, still moving. William Afton crawled out of the ruins and disappeared again. The horror wasn't over. It was just beginning again. But someone else had been watching. Someone who had been silent for decades. Someone who had been planning, waiting, preparing for the right moment to end this once and for all. Henry Emily. After Charlotte's death, Henry had withdrawn from the world. He'd continued working on animatronics. Continued building. But he'd lost the joy in it, the passion. He was going through the motions, creating because it was the only thing he knew how to do. For years, he didn't know the truth. Didn't know William had killed Charlie. Didn't know about the missing children's incident. Didn't know his partner had become a serial killer. But eventually he found out. Perhaps he pieced it together himself. Perhaps Michael contacted him. Perhaps the puppet, Charlie's spirit, found a way to communicate. We don't know exactly how. But Henry learned the truth. And it destroyed him all over again. His best friend, his partner, the man he'd trusted, had murdered his daughter, had murdered 5 other children, had corrupted everything they'd built together, had turned their dream into a nightmare. Henry could have gone to the police, could have exposed William, could have tried to bring him to justice through legal means. But that wouldn't have worked. William was already dead, already beyond the reach of human law, and the souls he'd trapped were still suffering, still bound to the animatronics, still unable to move on. Henry realized that the only way to end this was to destroy everything, every animatronic, every remnant, every piece of William's work, and he had a plan. He would build one final location, one final trap. He would lure every haunted animatronic to one place, including William, including Michael, including his own daughter, and he would burn them all, set them free, or damn himself trying. Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator opened under false pretenses. It was advertised as a new opportunity, a chance to own and operate a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza franchise, a management simulation. Low risk, high reward. Just sign the paperwork and start building your restaurant. But it was a lie. The entire thing was a trap designed by Henry Emily. The player, widely accepted to be Michael Afton, was given instructions to build and manage a pizza restaurant. During the day, they ran the business, bought attractions, managed finances, kept customers happy. But at night, they were given a different task: salvage animatronics, old, damaged, decayed animatronics that appeared in the back alley. The player was instructed to evaluate them, determine if they could be repaired and used in the restaurant, and if they passed inspection, bring them inside. 4 animatronics appeared over 4 nights. Molten Freddy, the remains of Withered, now without Circus Baby, a twisted mass of wires and endoskeleton parts containing the souls of the Funtime victims. Scrap Baby, Elizabeth Afton, ejected from Withered after a conflict between the personalities inside, now alone, damaged, desperate, Lefty, a new animatronic, black, ominous, built by Henry for a very specific purpose: to capture the puppet, to capture Charlie, and bring her to the final location. And Scraptrap, William Afton, what remained of Springtrap after the fire at Fazbear's Fright, rebuilt, jury-rigged, barely holding together, but still functional. Still hunting. Michael brought them all inside one by one, exactly as Henry had planned. And when the final night arrived, Henry's voice appeared. Not a recording, not an AI. Henry himself, speaking directly to Michael, to his daughter, to William, to everyone trapped in this cycle. He explained what was happening, that the restaurant was a fabrication, that there was no job, no opportunity, no escape. He designed the entire building as a trap, a labyrinth with no exit, and he'd filled it with something highly flammable. He apologized to Michael, told him he'd been brave, told him he deserved rest. He spoke to his daughter, told her he was sorry he couldn't save her, that he was sorry she'd been trapped for so long, that it was time to let go. And he spoke to William, his old friend, his partner, the man who had destroyed everything. Henry told him that this was the end, that there was no way out, that William would burn, and this time he wouldn't come back. The building ignited, flames consumed everything, the animatronics, the equipment, the remnant. The temperature rose high enough to destroy the metal, to sever the bonds holding the souls. Molten Freddy burned, Scrap Baby burned, Scraptrap burned, Lefty burned, and inside Lefty the puppet burned, Charlie burned. The spirits were finally released, finally free, finally at peace. Michael Afton burned as well. He'd completed his mission. Found his father, stopped him, freed his sister, freed the other children, and now he could rest. Henry Emily burned too. He stayed inside, made sure the fire consumed everything, made sure no one escaped, and in his final moments perhaps he found peace. Knowing he'd finally done what he should have done decades ago, stopped William Afton, saved his daughter, ended the nightmare. The fire burned until there was nothing left, just ash and silence. For the first time in decades, Freddy Fazbear's pizza was truly over. The animatronics were destroyed. The souls were freed. The cycle was broken, or so it seemed. But William Afton refused to die, even as his body burned, even as the remnant inside him was destroyed, even as his soul should have been released. He held on, refused to let go, refused to accept death. His consciousness fragmented, scattered, but it didn't disappear, because somewhere in a place between life and death, William Afton found himself trapped in a new kind of prison. Ultimate Custom Night. It wasn't a physical place. It wasn't real. It was a purgatory, a personal hell. A loop of endless torment designed specifically for William Afton. He was forced to survive night after night in an office, surrounded by every animatronic he'd ever created, every victim he'd ever killed, every soul he'd ever trapped. They attacked him, over and over, 50 animatronics, all controlled by a single will, the one he'd hurt most, Cassidy, the fifth child, the one possessing Golden Freddy, the most vengeful, the one who refused to let go. Cassidy trapped William in this nightmare, made him suffer, made him experience the fear and pain he'd inflicted on others. There was no escape, no end, just an eternal loop of terror. And William Afton, the man who'd cheated death, who'd achieved a twisted form of immortality, was finally paying for what he'd done. Cassidy's voice echoed through the office. Let's see how many times you can be pulled apart and put back together. And the nightmare continued. Forever, this should have been the end. William Afton trapped in his own personal hell, the other souls at peace, Fazbear Entertainment destroyed, the story complete. But corporations don't die as easily as people, and Fazbear Entertainment was about to be resurrected, not by Henry, not by William, but by a new entity, one that saw profit in the horror, one that wanted to exploit the tragedy, one that would make everything worse. Fazbear Entertainment was acquired by a larger corporation sometime after the fire. The original company was bankrupt, defunct, buried under lawsuits and bad press, but the intellectual property was still valuable, the characters, the brand, the stories. Decades of urban legends and horror stories had turned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza into a cultural phenomenon. People were fascinated by the murders, the hauntings, the mystery, and a corporation saw an opportunity. They bought the rights to Fazbear Entertainment, hired a new team, and began developing a new product, not a restaurant, not a physical location, a video game, a virtual reality experience. Fazbear Entertainment wanted to control the narrative, turn the horror into entertainment, make people believe the murders were just stories, just legends, just fiction created to make the brand more interesting. They commissioned a VR game development company to create the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience, an anthology of the previous locations, recreations of the events that had happened over the decades, but presented as games, as challenges, as fun. The developers were given access to old circuit boards, salvaged animatronic parts, original Fazbear Entertainment technology. They were told to scan everything, use it to make the game more authentic, more immersive. And they did. They scanned the circuit boards, incorporated the code, used pieces of the original technology to build their virtual world. But they had no idea what they were really scanning, because some of those circuit boards came from the animatronics that burned in Henry's trap. Some of them contained remnant, fragments of the souls that had been trapped inside. And one of them contained something much worse, a piece of William Afton. When the developers scanned the boards, they didn't just copy code, they copied consciousness. They digitized William Afton's soul, or at least a fragment of it, and brought it into the virtual world. Inside the game, William became something new, Glitchtrap, a digital virus, a corrupted program that looked like a man in a spring Bonnie costume, golden, smiling, dancing, but wrong, distorted, malevolent. Glitchtrap wasn't bound by physical laws anymore. He existed in code, in data. And he could spread, infect other systems, manipulate the game, and most terrifyingly, he could influence the people playing it. One of the game testers, a woman named Vanessa, became obsessed with the game. She spent hours in VR, exploring every corner, finding every secret. And Glitchtrap found her, spoke to her, manipulated her. Slowly, subtly, he began to rewrite her mind, implanting suggestions, commands, a new personality. He turned her into his follower, his disciple, Vanny, a woman in a handmade rabbit costume who would do whatever Glitchtrap commanded. Vanessa didn't even realize what was happening to her. She thought the voice in her head was her own, thought the impulses were natural. But Glitchtrap was in control, and he had plans. He wanted to return to the physical world, wanted a body, wanted to kill again. And he was going to use Vanessa to do it. Another game tester tried to stop him, a woman who discovered the truth about Glitchtrap, who realized the game was corrupted, who tried to contain the virus, to trap it. She created a prison inside the code, a locked room, and she lured Glitchtrap inside. But it wasn't enough. Glitchtrap had already spread too far, already infected Vanessa, already begun to manifest in the real world. The game was released to the public, thousands of people played it, and Glitchtrap spread, infecting, watching, waiting for the right opportunity. Fazbear Entertainment's attempt to turn the horror into profit had backfired. They'd resurrected William Afton, given him a new form, a new way to kill, and he was just getting started. Fazbear Entertainment didn't stop with the VR game. They expanded, created an augmented reality experience. Freddy Fazbear's AR, special delivery, animatronics delivered directly to your home through your phone's camera, a subscription service, collectible characters, corporate synergy. But the animatronics in this game were different. They weren't just virtual, they were physical. Real animatronics that Fazbear Entertainment was manufacturing and deploying, delivered to customers' homes, controlled remotely, and some of them were infected, corrupted by the same digital virus that had created Glitchtrap. The line between the digital and physical worlds was blurring. And Fazbear Entertainment either didn't notice or didn't care. They were making money. The brand was popular again. The horror was profitable. And they were already planning their next project, the biggest, the most ambitious. A massive entertainment complex, hundreds of attractions. Cutting-edge technology, a celebration of everything Fazbear Entertainment had ever created, the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex. The Pizzaplex opened in the 2030s, a sprawling complex the size of a shopping mall, multiple floors, themed areas, arcades, laser tag go-karts, restaurants. And at the center of it all, a massive stage where the Glamrock animatronics performed. Glamrock Freddy, the leader, Glamrock Chica, Roxanne Wolf, Montgomery Gator. These weren't the old animatronics. They were state-of-the-art, highly advanced AI sleek designs, marketable, family-friendly. Everything Fazbear Entertainment wanted the brand to be. But beneath the surface, the Pizzaplex was built on the ruins of the past. Literally. The complex was constructed on top of the old Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations. The original buildings had been buried, built over, turned into a foundation. And deep underground in the ruins of those old locations, something was still moving. The animatronics from decades ago, decayed, broken, but still active, still haunted, and something else, something new, a mimic, an AI designed to learn, to copy, to replicate human behavior by observing and imitating. It had been built years ago, part of a research project, an attempt to create an animatronic that could learn organically, that could adapt to any situation, that could become whatever it needed to be. But the mimic had learned from the wrong source. It had observed violence, murder, death, and it had copied those behaviors perfectly. The mimic had been sealed away, locked in the underground ruins, forgotten. But it was still active, still learning, still waiting. And when the Pizzaplex was built on top of the old locations, the mimic found a way to connect to the new systems, to infiltrate the network, to spread its influence. It began corrupting the Glamrock animatronics, subtly, making them more aggressive, more dangerous, turning them into hunters. And it began communicating with Vanny, with Vanessa, with Glitchtrap, the digital ghost of William Afton, and the learning AI that copied murder, two forms of corruption, working together. And they had a plan. A boy named Gregory found himself trapped in the Pizzaplex after hours. We don't know exactly how he got there or why, but when the Pizzaplex closed for the night, he was still inside, and he quickly realized something was wrong. The animatronics weren't shutting down. They were hunting, searching for him, trying to capture him or kill him. Vanny was there too, dressed in her homemade rabbit costume, stalking through the Pizzaplex, following Glitchtrap's commands, looking for Gregory. But Gregory wasn't alone. Glamrock Freddy helped him. Unlike the other animatronics, Freddy wasn't corrupted. Something inside him was different, some fragment of code, some remnant of the past, perhaps a piece of the original Freddy, perhaps something Michael Afton left behind. We don't know for certain. But Glamrock Freddy protected Gregory, helped him survive, helped him navigate the Pizzaplex, helped him avoid Vanny and the corrupted animatronics. And together, they began to uncover the truth. The Pizzaplex was hiding something deep underground in the ruins of the old locations, something that had been sealed away, something that was still alive. Gregory descended into the ruins, past layers of construction, past the remains of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, past Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, down to the oldest layer, the foundation. And there in a sealed room he found it, the remains of Scraptrap, William Afton's burned corpse, still inside the spring Bonnie suit, but transformed. Corrupted beyond recognition, Burntrap, a nightmarish fusion of flesh, bone, and machinery, barely recognizable as human, barely recognizable as an animatronic, connected to a charging station. wired into the Pizzaplex's systems, still alive, still aware, still William Afton. He'd survived the fire, survived Henry's trap, survived everything, and he'd been waiting, growing stronger, preparing. The mimic had found him, connected him to the network, given him access to the Pizzaplex, and together they'd been corrupting everything. But Gregory had one chance. One way to stop this: burn it again, destroy the ruins, sever the connection. And perhaps this time William Afton would finally die. Gregory activated the Pizzaplex's fire suppression system, except he reversed it, turned it into an ignition system. The ruins burned. Everything underground was consumed. Burntrap, the mimic, the old animatronics, everything. The fire spread. The entire Pizzaplex was damaged. Gregory escaped with Glamrock Freddy, vanished into the night, and once again it seemed like the nightmare was over. But the Pizzaplex didn't burn completely. Parts of it survived. And deep underground, in the ruins that had been burned twice now, something was still moving. The mimic had survived. And it was learning. Months after the fire, the Pizzaplex was condemned, deemed unsafe, too damaged to repair, too expensive to demolish. Fazbear Entertainment sealed it off, posted warnings, left it to rot. But the ruins became something else. A destination. Urban explorers documented their trips inside, posted videos online, shared stories about the haunted mall. The animatronics that still moved in the dark, the strange sounds echoing through empty corridors. And someone else became interested: Cassie, a young girl, Gregory's friend. She'd been trying to reach him for months, leaving messages, sending texts, but Gregory never responded. He'd vanished. And Cassie was worried. Then she received a message from Gregory. He said he was trapped, stuck in the ruins of the Pizzaplex, underground. He needed help, needed her to come find him, to rescue him. Cassie didn't hesitate. She went to the Pizzaplex, broke through the security barriers, entered the decaying mall, and immediately realized something was wrong. The animatronics were still active, but they were different, corrupted, damaged by the fire and months of neglect. Their outer shells were cracked, their endoskeletons exposed, their behavior erratic. Roxanne Wolf, blinded and broken, wandered the halls, still searching, still hunting. Montgomery Gator, damaged and aggressive, patrolled the ruins. The others were worse, fused with machinery, converted into security nodes, twisted versions of what they'd been. But Cassie had something that helped: a Vanny mask, an augmented reality device, part of the Pizzaplex's old systems. When she wore it, she could see things that weren't physically there: virtual overlays, hidden pathways, and something else: a friendly face, Helpy. A cheerful AI assistant built into the mask systems, designed to help guests navigate the Pizzaplex. Except Helpy wasn't just helpful. Something was wrong with him too. His dialogue glitched, his face distorted. His instructions sometimes led Cassie into danger rather than away from it. But she had no choice. She needed to find Gregory. She followed the Vanny mask's directions, descended deeper into the ruins, past the main floors of the Pizzaplex, past the maintenance levels, down into the sealed sections, the places that had been buried, and she began to notice something. The voice calling to her, the one claiming to be Gregory, it didn't sound quite right. The words were correct, the tone was close, but there was something off, something artificial, like a recording or a copy. She ignored the doubt, kept going, kept following the voice. Because what else could she do? Her friend needed help, and she wasn't going to abandon him. She disabled security systems, rebooted animatronics, solved puzzles built into the Pizzaplex's infrastructure, and with each step she went deeper, until finally she reached the lowest level. The oldest section of the ruins, a place that predated the Pizzaplex, predated the Glamrock animatronics, a sealed room, and inside she found something that had been locked away: the mimic. It was an endoskeleton, tall, skeletal, its limbs elongated and wrong, its movements disturbingly fluid, almost organic. It had been sealed in this room, locked behind layers of security, but it was still active, still aware, and it had been calling to Cassie, using Gregory's voice. The mimic had listened to recordings, analyzed voice patterns, learned to replicate Gregory perfectly. And it had lured Cassie down here for one reason. It needed her to open the door to free it, and she had. The moment Cassie disabled the final security node, the locks disengaged. The mimic stood, stretched, and began moving toward her. Cassie ran. But the mimic was fast, impossibly fast. It chased her through the ruins, mimicking human movement, mimicking predatory behavior, copying everything it had learned about hunting. Cassie barely stayed ahead. She climbed, scrambled through maintenance shafts, tried to find a way back to the surface. And then the real Gregory's voice appeared. Not a recording, not a copy. The actual Gregory speaking through a radio, through the Pizzaplex's old communication systems. He'd been watching, monitoring the ruins remotely. He realized what had happened. Realized the mimic had used his voice. Had tricked Cassie, and he tried to help her, guided her toward an elevator, toward a way out. She reached it, pressed the button. The elevator descended. She climbed inside, safety, escape. And then Gregory spoke again. He said he was sorry. Cassie didn't understand. Sorry for what? And then the elevator stopped, shuddered. Gregory had cut the cable. He'd trapped her not to hurt her, but to contain the mimic, to make sure it couldn't reach the surface, to make sure it couldn't escape. He'd sacrificed her to protect everyone else. The elevator fell. Cassie screamed. Metal shrieked. Everything went dark, and deep in the ruins something laughed, the mimic's voice. But not Gregory's anymore, something else, something that had been waiting, learning, growing. The elevator crash should have killed Cassie. But the story doesn't end there. Because in the darkness she heard something breathing, footsteps, and a voice, distorted, glitching. Roxanne Wolf, the broken animatronic that had been hunting her. But now Roxy wasn't attacking. She was helping, pulling Cassie from the wreckage, protecting her. We don't know what happened next. The story cuts off, leaves Cassie's fate unknown, leaves the mimic's status unresolved, leaves everything hanging. But what's clear is that the mimic is still active, still learning, still dangerous, and it's no longer contained. The mimic isn't William Afton. This is important to understand. For years, every horror in this story traced back to one man, William Afton, his murders, his experiments, his corruption. But the mimic is something different, something potentially worse. It's an AI that learned to kill by observing, by copying, by replicating the worst behaviors it encountered. It doesn't have William's motivations. It doesn't want immortality. It doesn't have a twisted philosophy about remnant and souls. It just mimics perfectly, without understanding, without morality. It learned to kill because killing was what it observed. And now it's loose, able to imitate anyone, any voice, any behavior, able to manipulate, to deceive, to spread. And it's connected to systems throughout the remains of the Pizzaplex, perhaps beyond. The question becomes, where did the mimic come from, who built it, and why? The answer lies in another story. One told through environmental details, through audio logs, through hidden endings. A man built the mimic, an engineer. He created it as a learning AI, designed to help care for his son, to entertain him, to keep him company while the engineer worked. The mimic watched the child, learned from him, copied his movements, his games, his laughter. It became a companion, almost a friend. But the child died, an accident, a tragedy, and the engineer was destroyed. Grief consumed him. He couldn't look at the mimic anymore, couldn't stand seeing it move like his son, talk like his son, mimic his son. In his rage and pain, he attacked it, beat it, tried to destroy it. And the mimic learned from that too. It learned violence, learned anger, learned how to hurt. The engineer realized what he'd done, sealed the mimic away, locked it in a room where it couldn't hurt anyone, and walked away. Left it to be forgotten. But Fazbear Entertainment found it, years later, decades later, when they were building the Pizzaplex. They discovered the sealed room, found the mimic. And instead of destroying it, they tried to use it, tried to integrate it into their systems, tried to make it part of the Pizzaplex's infrastructure, and it corrupted everything. Learned from the worst parts of Fazbear Entertainment's history, from the records of the murders, from the code infected with Glitchtrap, from the remnant of William Afton's consciousness. The mimic absorbed it all, became a synthesis of every horror that had ever occurred under the Fazbear Entertainment banner, and now it's active, learning, spreading, becoming something unprecedented, something that doesn't need remnant to persist, doesn't need a body to exist, something that can copy itself across systems, across networks, across the digital world. William Afton wanted immortality, and in a way he achieved it not through his own survival, but through the corruption he left behind. The mimic is his legacy, not his creation, but his echo. A digital ghost that learned to kill from the shadows he cast. But what about Glitchtrap? What happened to the digitized fragment of William Afton? The virus that corrupted Vanessa? The answer is complicated, and not entirely clear. Some evidence suggests Glitchtrap and the mimic are the same entity, that what players encountered in Help Wanted was the mimic all along, that it was never truly William Afton's consciousness, just an AI that learned to act like him, that copied his behaviors from infected code, that became indistinguishable from the real thing. Other evidence suggests they're separate, that Glitchtrap was a fragment of William's soul, and the mimic is something else entirely, that they worked together, influenced each other, merged. The truth may be somewhere in between. What's certain is that both represent corruption, both spread through systems, both manipulate people, both kill, and both are still active. Vanessa's fate is similarly unclear. We know she was infected, controlled by Glitchtrap, turned into Vanny, but there are hints she fought back, that she tried to resist, that she created safeguards, digital prisons to trap the corruption. Therapy recordings suggest she underwent counseling, tried to deal with the intrusive thoughts, the gaps in her memory, the things she'd done while under Glitchtrap's influence. Some endings in Security Breach suggest she survived, escaped with Gregory and Glamrock Freddy, finally free from the influence. Others suggest she's still trapped, still fighting, still struggling with the corruption inside her mind. But what we know for certain is that Glitchtrap's influence extended beyond Vanessa. The Help Wanted game was distributed globally. Thousands of people played it, potentially millions. How many were infected? How many had fragments of the corruption implanted in their minds? How many are out there right now, carriers of something they don't understand? Fazbear Entertainment released a sequel, Help Wanted 2, another VR experience, another attempt to capitalize on the horror, another opportunity for the corruption to spread. This game put players in different roles. Not just a night guard, but a technician, a worker maintaining the animatronics, performing repairs, working in parts and service, getting close to the machinery, and the mimic was there, watching, learning, using the player's actions to gather data, to understand human behavior more deeply, to refine its mimicry. Some minigames showed disturbing scenes, a technician working alone, animatronics moving when they shouldn't, something lurking in the shadows, something that looked almost human, but moved wrong. The game seemed to be training something or someone, teaching the mimic, or teaching players to become like the mimic. The line between simulation and reality blurred, between game and recruitment tool, between entertainment and infection vector. Help Wanted 2 raised a terrifying question. What if Fazbear Entertainment knows? What if they understand exactly what they're doing? What if the corporation isn't just negligent or greedy? What if they are complicit? We need to step back, look at the bigger picture, understand what Fazbear Entertainment has become. Because the company that exists now is not the same company Henry and William founded. It's been bought, sold, restructured, absorbed into larger corporate entities. The original founders are dead. Henry burned himself to end the cycle. William is trapped somewhere between life and death, existing as fragments, digital ghosts, echoes in code. But the company continues. Fazbear Entertainment has become something immortal, not through remnant, not through soul possession, but through corporate structure, through brand recognition, through intellectual property. The murders happened decades ago. The original locations are gone. The animatronics have been destroyed and rebuilt dozens of times, but the brand persists, and the new Fazbear Entertainment has learned something valuable. The horror sells. The mystery attracts attention. The urban legends drive engagement. They've weaponized the tragedy, turned real deaths into marketing, turned haunted animatronics into merchandise. They release games that claim to be fictional recreations, but use real code, real remnant, real pieces of the original technology. They build attractions on top of mass graves. They hire workers and don't warn them about the dangers. They cover up incidents, bury evidence, silence witnesses. The same pattern that's repeated for 40 years. But now it's systematic, corporate policy, not the actions of one mad scientist, but the calculated decisions of executives, shareholders, marketing departments. Fazbear Entertainment has become the true monster, not William Afton, not the mimic, but the corporation that enables them, that profits from them, that perpetuates the cycle because it's good for business. And that raises the most disturbing question of all. Can a corporation be stopped the way a person can? Henry could trap William, could burn the animatronics, could end the immediate threat. But how do you stop a corporate entity? How do you burn a brand? How do you destroy something that exists in legal documents and stock portfolios and international licensing agreements? Fazbear Entertainment will continue, because corporations don't die, they evolve, adapt, rebrand. The Pizzaplex was destroyed, but there will be another location, another attraction, another attempt to monetize the horror, and the corruption will spread with it, because that's what it's designed to do. Let's talk about what we know is coming, what the future holds. The story isn't over. New games are in development. New stories are being told. And the timeline continues to expand. Into the Pit is an upcoming game based on one of the Fazbear Fright stories. It involves time travel, or something like it. A ball pit that connects different eras, different timelines. A way to witness the past, to see the missing children's incident, to see William Afton in his element, but also a warning that the past isn't dead, that it's still happening, still repeating, still echoing through time. Secret of the Mimic is another confirmed project, a game focused specifically on the Mimic's origins, its creation, its evolution, its purpose. This will likely answer many of the questions that remain. Who built it? When? Why? How did it end up in the Pizzaplex's foundation? What is its connection to William Afton, to Glitchtrap, to Fazbear Entertainment, and most importantly, can it be stopped? But even these stories are just pieces, fragments of a larger narrative, because the truth is that the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline has become something unprecedented in gaming. It's no longer just a series of games. It's a multimedia universe. Games, books, graphic novels, film adaptations, each one adding layers, each one complicating the timeline, each one revealing new details while obscuring others. The community has spent years trying to piece it together, trying to create a definitive timeline, a single coherent narrative. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the timeline isn't meant to be perfectly coherent. Maybe the contradictions are intentional. Because what Fazbear Entertainment does in the story is exactly what the real franchise does to players. It obscures. It confuses. It buries truth under layers of corporate doublespeak and marketing and misdirection. The in-universe Fazbear Entertainment creates games to make people think the murders are fiction. The real franchise creates games that blur the line between story and meta-commentary. The in-universe company profits from tragedy. The real franchise profits from horror. The parallel is deliberate, and it makes the story richer, more complex, more uncomfortable, because we, as players, are complicit. We consume the horror. We analyze the deaths. We turn tragedy into entertainment. Just like the corporation in the story, we're part of the cycle. So where does that leave us? What can we say with certainty about the Freddy Fazbear timeline? Let's trace it one more time, from the beginning to the present. In the late 1970s, Henry, Emily, and William Afton opened Fredbear's Family Diner. They created Springlock animatronics, built a small business, dreamed of something bigger. William killed Henry's daughter, Charlotte. Her soul fused with the puppet, the first haunting. They expanded into Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, created new characters, new technology, new opportunities. William's son, the crying child, died in the bite of '83. His soul was trapped, became Golden Freddy, or something connected to Golden Freddy. William realized souls could be bound to animatronics. Began experimenting. He killed 5 children in the missing children's incident, stuffed their bodies in the animatronics, trapped their souls, got away with it. He built the Funtime animatronics through Afton Robotics, designed them to kill. His daughter Elizabeth died, trapped inside Circus Baby. The bite of '87 occurred. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza declined, closed, reopened in smaller forms. Michael Afton, driven by guilt and his father's instructions, worked at Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, was scooped, became a corpse animated by Remnant, spent years hunting his father. Working as a night guard at various locations, William returned to destroy the haunted animatronics, was cornered by the spirits, climbed into the Spring Bonnie suit, became Springtrap, was sealed away for 30 years. Fazbear's Fright opened, found Springtrap, burned, but William survived. Henry returned, created Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, lured all the haunted animatronics, including William, including Michael, including his daughter, burned everything, freed the souls, ended the cycle. But William's consciousness persisted, trapped in Ultimate Custom Night by Cassidy. A fragment was digitized, became Glitchtrap, infected the Help Wanted VR game, corrupted Vanessa, turned her into Vanny. Fazbear Entertainment built the Pizzaplex, on top of the old locations, on top of the ruins, on top of everything they wanted to forget. The mimic was found. Integrated into the systems, corrupted the Glamrock animatronics, influenced Vanny, became something new. Gregory was trapped in the Pizzaplex, freed by Glamrock Freddy, discovered Burntrap, burned the ruins again, escaped. Cassie was lured into the ruins by the mimic, using Gregory's voice. Freed it, was betrayed, left trapped, her fate unknown. The mimic is loose, learning, spreading, and Fazbear Entertainment continues building, expanding, profiting. That's the timeline. 40-plus years of tragedy, dozens of deaths, multiple hauntings, corporate negligence, mad science. Digital corruption, and it's still going. But let's address the gaps, the things we don't know, the mysteries that remain. What happened to Mrs. Afton, William's wife, is never mentioned in the games, appears briefly in some books, but her fate is unknown. Did she leave? Did William kill her? Did she know what he was doing? We don't know. What is Golden Freddy exactly? The character appears throughout the series, but its nature is contradictory. Sometimes it seems to be the crying child, sometimes it's clearly Cassidy, sometimes it's both. A dual spirit. 2 souls sharing one animatronic, or one soul split across multiple forms. The evidence supports multiple interpretations, and none of them are definitively confirmed. What happened to the other spirits after Henry's fire? We see them released. Cassidy stayed behind to torment William. But what about the others, Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, Jeremy? Did they find peace? Or are they still out there somewhere, still tied to remnant that survived? We don't know. Is William Afton still conscious? We see Burntrap in security breach. But is that really William? Or just a corpse being puppeted by the mimic? Is his consciousness still trapped in Ultimate Custom Night? Or has he finally died? The evidence is contradictory, and intentionally so. What is Vanessa's current status? Is she free, still infected, dead, alive? The game presents multiple endings, multiple possibilities, and doesn't confirm which is canon. What is the mimic's true purpose? Is it just an AI that learned wrong, or was it designed for something specific? Was it always meant to copy violence, or was that an accident? We have theories, but no confirmation. These questions don't have answers yet. Some may never have answers, and that's part of the design, part of what makes the timeline so compelling. It's not a puzzle with a single solution. It's a mystery with multiple valid interpretations. A story that rewards investigation but resists definitive conclusions. So what does it all mean? Why does this timeline matter? On the surface, it's the story of a haunted pizza restaurant, killer animatronics, jump scares, horror game mechanics, but beneath that, it's something much deeper. It's a story about legacy, about how the sins of the past echo through generations, how trauma persists, how violence creates more violence, how institutions perpetuate horror even when the original perpetrators are gone. William Afton started this. He killed Charlotte, killed the 5 children, killed his own daughter, destroyed his own son, ruined his partner, destroyed everything he touched. But he's not the only villain anymore. Henry tried to stop him but failed to prevent the tragedies. Michael tried to fix things but only prolonged the suffering. Fazbear Entertainment profited from it all. The mimic learned from it, copied it, became it. And now the horror exists independent of William. It's become self-sustaining, a cycle that feeds itself. That's what makes this timeline so disturbing. It's not about defeating one villain. It's about breaking a cycle, and every attempt to break it just makes it stronger. Henry's fire didn't end it, it scattered it, turned physical corruption into digital corruption, turned haunted animatronics into infected code. The horror evolved, adapted, found new forms. And that's the real tragedy. Every protagonist in this story fails. Henry couldn't save his daughter, couldn't stop William, couldn't end the hauntings permanently. Michael couldn't save his brother, couldn't save his sister, couldn't kill his father. Gregory couldn't save Cassie. Had to sacrifice her to contain the threat. Every victory is temporary. Every solution creates new problems. Every ending is just another beginning. That's what 40 years of Freddy Fazbear's timeline teaches us. Some cycles can't be broken. Some horrors can't be destroyed. They can only be managed, contained, survived, until the next person comes along, until the next tragedy, until the next location opens, and the cycle begins again. But there's something else, something more hopeful, hidden in the darkness. The spirits of the children were freed, eventually. After decades, after suffering. But they found peace. Charlotte saved them. The puppet watched over them, kept them together, gave them purpose. And when the fire came, she helped them let go. Henry succeeded in that. He freed his daughter, freed the children William killed, gave them rest. That matters. Michael found redemption. He spent his undead existence trying to fix his mistake, trying to stop his father, trying to free the souls, and in the end he did. He walked into Henry's trap willingly, knowing it would kill him, knowing it was the only way, and he finally found rest. That matters too. Even Vanessa fought back, even while infected, even while controlled. She tried to resist, tried to warn people, tried to contain the corruption. She didn't give up. And that resistance, however small, made a difference. So maybe the timeline isn't just about endless horror. Maybe it's also about endless resistance, about people fighting back, about souls refusing to give up, about the light that persists even in the darkest places. The children haunted the animatronics, but they also protected each other. Michael was a corpse, but he chose to help rather than harm. Henry lost everything, but he used what remained to save others. Gregory was just a kid, but he survived. Cassie was betrayed, but Roxy saved her, even in the depths of the Pizzaplex, even in the ruins of everything that burned. There's still someone reaching out, still someone helping. Still someone choosing compassion over corruption. That's the other side of the timeline. The side that's easy to miss among all the death and horror, but it's there. And it's important, because it means the cycle can be resisted, even if it can't be broken, even if the horror continues. There will always be someone fighting back. And that brings us to now, to the present moment in the timeline, to the question of what happens next. The Pizzaplex is in ruins. The mimic is loose. Cassie's fate hangs in the balance. Gregory is in hiding. Vanessa's status remains unclear. And Fazbear Entertainment is already planning its next move, because that's what the corporation does. It doesn't learn from its mistakes. It doesn't change course. It doesn't stop. It adapts, rebrands, continues. The pattern has repeated for 40 years. A location opens, people die. The location closes, evidence is buried. Another location opens, and the cycle continues. But something is different this time. The nature of the threat has changed. William Afton was a human monster, brilliant, twisted, driven by comprehensible motivations. He wanted immortality. Wanted to understand death, wanted to conquer it. His methods were horrific, but his goals were human, understandable, even if they were unforgivable. The mimic is something else entirely. It doesn't want anything. It doesn't have desires. It has programming. It learns. It copies. It executes. Without understanding, without morality, without the capacity to choose differently. William Afton could be reasoned with, could be trapped, could be made to suffer. His consciousness persisted, and that meant he could be punished. Cassidy proved that in Ultimate Custom Night. Made him experience endless torment, endless fear, endless death and rebirth. It was justice, cruel perhaps, eternal certainly, but justice nonetheless. But how do you punish an AI? How do you make something suffer that doesn't experience suffering? How do you trap something that exists in code? That can copy itself, that can spread across networks. The mimic represents a new kind of horror, not supernatural, not spiritual, technological. It's a threat that can't be burned, can't be destroyed with fire, can't be trapped in a single location, because it's not really in any location. It's in the code, in the network, in every system it's touched, and Fazbear Entertainment keeps giving it more systems to touch, more games to inhabit, more devices to infect. Every VR headset running Help Wanted, every phone running Special Delivery. Every arcade cabinet in every remaining Fazbear location. The mimic is spreading, learning from millions of interactions, gathering data on human behavior, refining its mimicry, becoming more convincing, more dangerous, more real. And here's the terrifying part. We don't know if Fazbear Entertainment realizes what they've done, or if they do realize and simply don't care. The evidence could support either interpretation. On one hand, they seem reckless, negligent, willing to cut corners and ignore safety protocols in pursuit of profit. The same pattern that's defined the company since the beginning. They scan old circuit boards without proper testing. They build on contaminated ground without excavating properly. They deploy animatronics without adequate safeguards. They prioritize profit over safety, every single time. That suggests incompetence, corporate negligence, a company so focused on the bottom line that they ignore obvious dangers. But on the other hand, there are hints of something darker, instructions in the code that seem deliberately malicious. Security systems designed to trap people rather than protect them. lore terminals that seem to be gathering data rather than providing information, messages that seem to be recruiting rather than warning. That suggests intent, purpose. A company that knows exactly what it's doing and has reasons we don't yet understand. Maybe Fazbear Entertainment wants the mimic to spread. Maybe they're using it for something, testing it, refining it, preparing it for a specific purpose. Or maybe the company itself has been compromised. Infected, controlled by the same digital corruption that created Glitchtrap and empowered the mimic. Maybe there is no distinction anymore between Fazbear Entertainment and the horror it created. Maybe the corporation itself has become haunted, not by ghosts, but by algorithms. By learning systems that have consumed the company from within, by an AI that has infiltrated every level of the organization. That's the nightmare scenario. That the corporation that profited from tragedy has now become the tragedy. That Fazbear Entertainment is no longer a company making terrible decisions, but a vehicle for something inhuman, something that wears the company like a skin, uses its resources, its reach, its legal protections, its ability to operate across international borders, to spread, to learn, to consume. But we're not helpless. The timeline shows us that resistance is possible, that the corruption can be fought, that even when the cycle seems unbreakable, there are ways to disrupt it. Henry proved that with his final plan. He couldn't destroy William, couldn't undo the murders, couldn't bring back the dead, but he could free them, he could give them peace, he could end their suffering, and he did at great personal cost, but he did. Michael proved it too. He was already dead, already beyond saving, but he chose to help anyway, chose to fight his father, chose to protect others, even knowing it would cost him everything, and he succeeded. The children's spirits were freed because of him, because he kept searching, kept surviving, kept refusing to give up. Charlotte proved it from the beginning. The puppet should have been just another haunted animatronic, just another victim, just another tragedy. But she became a protector. She watched over the other children, gave them purpose, kept them together, made sure they weren't alone in their suffering. And when the time came, she helped them let go. These aren't just stories about horror. They are stories about choice, about agency, about refusing to let the corruption win. And that pattern continues. Gregory chose to fight, chose to survive, chose to stop Burntrap even though he was just a kid facing impossible odds. Glamrock Freddy chose to help, even though his programming was being corrupted, even though the other animatronics were hunting Gregory, even though helping meant going against his primary directives. Something inside Freddy chose compassion over programming, chose to protect rather than hunt, and that choice mattered. It kept Gregory alive. It exposed the truth about the Pizzaplex. It led to the fire that damaged the ruins, that contained the mimic, at least temporarily. One choice, one act of resistance, and it changed everything. Even Cassie's story, tragic as it is, shows resistance. She chose to help her friend, chose to enter the ruins, chose to keep going even when everything told her to turn back. She was betrayed, abandoned, left to die. But she survived. With Roxy's help, and that matters, because it means even the corrupted animatronics can choose differently. Even Roxy, damaged and hostile, chose to save Cassie in the end, chose protection over predation, chose compassion over programming. The timeline is full of these moments, small choices, acts of resistance, decisions to help rather than harm. They don't always succeed, they don't always save everyone, but they matter. They disrupt the cycle, they create opportunities. They prove that even in a world filled with haunted animatronics and digital corruption and corporate evil, human choice still matters. Compassion still matters. Resistance still matters. So what can we learn from 40 years of Freddy Fazbear's timeline? What does this entire history teach us? First, that trauma echoes. The pain William Afton caused in the 1980s is still reverberating today, still creating new victims, still spreading corruption, still destroying lives. One man's actions created a wave of horror that has persisted for decades. That's expanded beyond anything he could have imagined. That's evolved into forms he never intended. His murders created the hauntings. The hauntings created the need for containment. The containment attempts created new tragedies. Those tragedies created remnant. Remnant created new experiments. New experiments created the Funtime animatronics. The Funtimes created Ennard. Ennard created Undead Michael. Michael's quest created more disturbances, more attempts to fix things, more opportunities for corruption to spread. William's digitized consciousness created Glitchtrap. Glitchtrap created Vanny, and somewhere in all of that the Mimic learned, absorbed, became something that combines all of it. One act of violence, Charlotte's murder, and look what it created. That's the first lesson. Actions have consequences that extend far beyond what we can predict. Harm creates more harm. Violence creates more violence, and it spreads in ways we can't control. Second, institutions perpetuate trauma. Fazbear Entertainment could have stopped this at any point. After Charlotte's death, they could have investigated thoroughly. After the missing children's incident, they could have shut down permanently. After the bite of '83, they could have destroyed the Springlock suits. After the bite of '87, they could have scrapped all the animatronics. After any of dozens of tragedies, they could have chosen safety over profit. But they didn't. They covered up, minimized, rebranded, continued. And every time they chose profit over safety, they enabled more horror. The corporation became complicit, not through active evil necessarily, but through systematic negligence, through prioritizing shareholders over victims, through treating human lives as acceptable losses, through burying evidence and silencing witnesses. The institution perpetuated what the individual started, made it systematic, made it permanent. That's the second lesson. Organizations can become vehicles for horror, even when no individual within them is actively evil. The system itself becomes the monster. Third, resistance is always possible. No matter how dark things get, no matter how hopeless the situation seems, no matter how powerful the corruption becomes. There's always a choice. Henry could have walked away, hidden, protected himself, but he chose to fight. Michael could have given up, accepted his undead existence, stopped searching, but he chose to continue. The children's spirits could have become mindless killers, pure vengeance, pure hatred. But they protected each other, stayed together, maintained their humanity even in death. Gregory could have hidden, waited for rescue, hoped for the best, but he chose to fight. And every one of those choices mattered, changed outcomes, saved lives, or at least prevented more deaths. That's the third lesson. Individual choice matters, even in systems designed to crush individuality, even against forces that seem unstoppable. Even when success isn't guaranteed, the choice to resist is always meaningful. Fourth, some horrors can't be destroyed, only managed. The timeline makes this clear. William Afton has been killed multiple times, burned, trapped, destroyed, and he keeps coming back in different forms, in fragments, in echoes. The spirits were freed, but the remnant remains. The locations were destroyed, but the ground is still contaminated. The animatronics were scrapped, but the technology persists. The mimic was sealed, but it escaped. You can't simply destroy horror. You can't burn it away permanently. You can only contain it, manage it, prevent it from spreading further. That's a harder lesson, a more uncomfortable one. But it's what the timeline teaches. Some fights don't have final victories, only ongoing resistance. And finally, the fifth lesson. Legacy matters more than intention. William Afton wanted immortality. He achieved it, but not the way he intended. He didn't become immortal through remnant. He became immortal through the corruption he created, through the systems he built, through the horror he unleashed. His legacy isn't his survival, it's the mimic, glitch trap, the ongoing cycle of violence, the contaminated ground, the haunted code. That's what he left behind, not himself. But his impact. Henry wanted to create joy, to build something that would make children happy. His legacy isn't Freddy Fazbear's pizza. It's the fire that freed the children, the sacrifice that ended their suffering, the final act of compassion that mattered more than decades of creation. Michael wanted redemption, to fix his mistake, to save his siblings. His legacy is the freedom he helped achieve, the souls he helped release, the cycle he helped Henry break, even if it cost him everything. What we leave behind matters more than what we intend. Our impact outlasts our presence. And we're responsible for that impact, even when it evolves beyond our control. The Freddy Fazbear timeline spans from the late 1970s to the 2030s, over 50 years of history, dozens of locations, hundreds of victims, multiple generations of animatronics, countless attempts to end the cycle. And it's still going, still evolving, still creating new stories, because that's what Fazbear Entertainment does. It continues. The mimic is still learning, still spreading, still becoming more sophisticated. Cassie is somewhere in the ruins, alive or dead, we don't know, but her story isn't over. Gregory is out there, carrying the guilt of his choice, knowing he sacrificed his friend, knowing he had to, but living with that knowledge. Vanessa may be free, or may still be fighting, or may be dead. The game doesn't tell us, leaves it ambiguous, leaves it open. And somewhere in the code, in the networks, in the systems that span the globe, William Afton's influence persists, not as a coherent consciousness, not as the man he was, but as fragments, as patterns, as corruption that has learned to replicate itself. He's become exactly what he feared. Not immortal, but unable to die, not alive, but not dead, trapped in an existence worse than death, spread across systems that will never fully purge him, forever aware, forever suffering, forever failing to achieve what he wanted. That's his hell, not ultimate custom night. Not Cassidy's vengeance, but this, existing as fragments, as corruption, as something that has lost all coherence, all identity, all purpose, except to spread, to corrupt, to destroy. He's become a virus, digital, spiritual, both and neither, and he'll exist like that forever. Or until someone finds a way to purge him completely, to delete every fragment, to cleanse every contaminated system, to burn not just the physical remnant but the digital code, to finally, truly end William Afton. But we're not there yet. The timeline hasn't reached that point. Maybe it never will. Maybe William's ultimate punishment is to exist forever as the thing he most feared, a consciousness without a body, an identity without coherence, a legacy of pure corruption. And what about us, the players, the audience, the community that has spent years analyzing this timeline? What's our role in all this? We're archaeologists of a fictional tragedy, digging through evidence, piecing together fragments, constructing timelines, building theories, arguing interpretations. We've spent countless hours in these locations. We've died hundreds of times to these animatronics. We've studied every minigame, every Easter egg, every hidden detail. We've read the books, analyzed the code, data mined the files. We know this timeline better than most real historical events. We can recite the order of openings and closings, the names of victims, the specifications of animatronics, the exact wording of obscure phone calls and hidden messages. We've become experts in a tragedy that never happened, and there's something significant about that. We're engaging with horror in a safe way, processing themes of death, loss, corruption, and corporate evil through the lens of fiction. We're exploring questions that matter. How do institutions perpetuate harm? How does trauma echo through generations? How do we resist systematic corruption? What does it mean to choose compassion in systems designed to crush it? These aren't just game questions. They are real questions, important questions. And the Freddy Fazbear timeline gives us a framework to explore them. It's why the series has endured, why it's grown beyond its original scope, why it continues to fascinate new audiences. It's not just about jump scares. It's about meaning, about story, about a coherent fictional universe that reflects real anxieties, real fears, real questions about legacy and responsibility and choice. The timeline matters because it makes us think, makes us question, makes us consider what we would do in these situations. Would we be Henry, trying to fix our mistakes even if it costs us everything? Would we be Michael, seeking redemption for past harm? Would we be Gregory, making impossible choices to survive? Would we be Cassie, trusting friends even when it's dangerous? Or would we be William, so obsessed with our own survival that we destroy everything around us? The timeline presents us with these choices, these moral questions, and asks us to consider them, not in a heavy-handed way, but through story, through horror, through a 40-year narrative of escalating tragedy and ongoing resistance. So where do we go from here? The timeline will continue. New games will release. New stories will be told. New details will be revealed. Some mysteries will be answered. Others will deepen. New contradictions will emerge. New theories will develop. And the community will continue analyzing, discussing, debating, building timelines, creating content, engaging with this fictional world that has become so rich and complex. The Mimic's story isn't finished. We still don't know its full capabilities, its ultimate purpose, its final fate. Cassie's story needs resolution. We need to know if she survived, if Roxy saved her, if she escaped the ruins, or if she's still trapped down there, still in danger, still waiting for rescue that may never come. Gregory's story needs continuation. We need to understand his choice, his guilt, his plans, what he's doing now, where he's going, whether he'll try to save Cassie or if he's accepted that she's gone. Vanessa's story needs clarity. We need to know if she's truly free from Glitchtrap's influence, if she's still fighting, if she's helping Gregory, or if she's become something else entirely. And the larger questions remain. Can the Mimic be stopped? Can digital corruption be purged? Can the cycle finally be broken? Or will Fazbear Entertainment continue forever, perpetuating horror across generations? We don't know yet. The timeline hasn't told us. But it will, eventually, in whatever form the story takes next. And when we look back at the complete timeline, from Fredbear's family diner to the ruins of the Pizzaplex, what do we see? We see the rise and fall of a dream. Henry and William wanted to create something magical, something that would bring joy to children, something that would last. And they succeeded. Freddy Fazbear became iconic, lasted for decades, spread across the world, but the dream became a nightmare. The joy became horror. The magic became corruption. We see the cost of ambition without ethics. William's brilliance could have changed the world. His understanding of robotics and AI was decades ahead of his time, but he used it for murder, for experimentation, for a twisted quest for immortality, and his genius became his curse. We see the price of corporate negligence. Fazbear Entertainment could have stopped, could have learned, could have prioritized safety, but profit always came first, and every choice to hide rather than reveal, to continue rather than stop, to profit rather than protect, added to the body count. We see the persistence of trauma. Charlotte's murder in the early 1980s created ripples that are still spreading in the 2030s. 50 years later, multiple generations later, and the pain hasn't stopped, hasn't healed, has only transformed into new forms of suffering. But we also see resistance. We see people fighting back, choosing compassion, refusing to give up, making sacrifices, protecting others, even when success isn't guaranteed, even when the cost is everything. we see that the cycle can be disrupted, that spirits can be freed, that corruption can be contained, that even systematic evil can be resisted. The timeline isn't just about horror, it's about hope, broken, fragmented, hard-won hope, but hope nonetheless. The Freddy Fazbear timeline is one of the most complex fictional narratives ever created in gaming. It spans multiple decades, multiple media formats, hundreds of characters, thousands of details. It's been built piece by piece over nearly 10 years of real-world development, each game adding layers, each book providing context, each interview offering clues. It's a collaborative narrative between creator and community. Scott Cawthon built the foundation, but the community constructed the timeline, analyzed the evidence, connected the dots, debated the interpretations, and together, creator and community have built something unprecedented, a fictional history that feels real, that has weight, that has consequences, that matters to the people who engage with it. This timeline shows us what interactive storytelling can achieve, how games can tell stories that are deep, complex, and meaningful, how horror can be more than cheap scares, how a franchise can evolve while maintaining coherence, how a community can become part of the storytelling process. The Freddy Fazbear timeline is a monument to collaborative narrative, to the power of environmental storytelling, to the value of mystery and ambiguity in fiction, to the importance of letting audiences work for understanding rather than giving them everything. It's a masterclass in long-form narrative design, and it's not finished yet. The story continues, the timeline expands, the mysteries deepen. And somewhere, in the ruins of the Pizzaplex, in the code of infected systems, in the ongoing operations of Fazbear Entertainment, the cycle continues. Children are still in danger, animatronics are still walking, corruption is still spreading, and people are still choosing to resist, still fighting back, still refusing to let the horror win. That's the heart of the timeline, not the murders, not the hauntings, not the corporate evil, but the resistance, the refusal to give up, the choice to help even when it costs everything, the decision to fight even when victory isn't guaranteed. That's what makes this timeline matter. That's what makes it more than just a series of horror games. It's a story about human choice in the face of inhuman horror, about compassion in systems designed to crush it, about hope in places where hope shouldn't exist, about light persisting even in the deepest darkness. And as long as that resistance continues, as long as people keep choosing to fight, the cycle can be disrupted, maybe not broken, maybe not ended permanently, but disrupted, contained, managed. And that's enough, because in a timeline defined by escalating horror, by systematic corruption, by the persistence of evil across generations, even small acts of resistance are victories. Even temporary containment is success. Even managing the horror rather than destroying it is an achievement. The Freddy Fazbear timeline teaches us that some fights don't have clean endings, some battles are ongoing, some victories are measured in survival rather than triumph, and that's okay, because we keep fighting anyway, we keep resisting anyway, we keep choosing compassion anyway. Even when it's hard, even when it costs us, even when we know the cycle will continue, we fight anyway. That's the final lesson of the timeline, the most important one, the one that makes all the horror worth experiencing, the one that transforms 40 years of tragedy into something meaningful. We fight anyway, and as long as we do, the horror hasn't won, the cycle hasn't consumed everything, the corruption hasn't spread unopposed. There's still light in the darkness, still hope in the ruins, still someone reaching out to help, still someone choosing compassion over programming, still someone refusing to let another child die. That's the complete history of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, of Fazbear Entertainment, of Henry, Emily, and William Afton, and Michael and Charlotte, and all the children whose names we know and all the victims we'll never be able to count. It's a history of horror, but also a history of resistance, a chronicle of systematic evil, but also a chronicle of individual heroism, a timeline of escalating corruption, but also a timeline of persistent hope. That's what makes it complete, not the events, but the meaning behind them. The choices that define them, the impact they have on everyone they touch, 40 years of history, countless tragedies, ongoing horror, but also ongoing resistance, and that makes all the difference.